Chapter 11. Winnie did not stop screaming from the moment she slid down the Boxtroll chute onto the conveyor belt and into the pile of sleeping Boxtrolls. The slumber rudely interrupted. The Boxtrolls began to stir. All around her, boxes suddenly sprouted arms and legs and heads. Winnie opened her mouth and began to scream again. "They're everywhere! The planet is seething with Boxtrolls!" she shrieked. She scrambled backward, away from the pile, until her back collided with the cavern wall. Then she flung both hands up in front of her face. "No! Get away! Stay away from me! Don't come any closer! Someone help me! Wealthy girl in danger!" Winnie buried her face in her hands, stifling a sob. "I expect my toes will make the prettiest necklace any of you have ever seen," she said with a sniff. Then she pulled herself together, clasped her hands in front of her, and bravely prepared to meet her maker. But no one was paying the slightest bit of attention to her. All the Boxtrolls were gathered around Eggs. "I'm telling you, I saw them," Egg said. "It's not just me and Fish who made it. They're all alive. All of them." The Boxtrolls were gurgling with delight and amazement, drumming their claws in their boxes and nudging each other. "What are they doing?" Winnie asked. "What's going on?" "I saw them with my own eyes," Eggs promised them. "Books, Sparky, knickers, oil can. I'm telling you, they're all alive." "What do we? What secret like what?" chortled a small, sweet-looking Boxtroll in a candy box. "The Red Hats are keeping them in a pit in a big old factory on Curd's Way," Egg said. "They're forcing them to work. I think they're making them build something." Winnie was beginning to feel less in fear for her own life, and more personally affronted that no one was interested in the magnificent necklace her toes would make. "What's wrong with them?" she asked Eggs, looking mildly outraged. "Why aren't they ripping out our eyeballs and slurping our intestines like noodles?" On hearing Winnie's question, several Boxtrolls disappeared into their boxes. Winnie didn't notice. "Where are the rivers of blood and mountains of bones? I was promised mountains of bones!" A chorus of frightened squeaks of various pitches came from the Boxtrolls, who were now all hiding in their boxes. "I already told you, we don't eat people," Egg said, shaking his head. "We only eat bugs. Look, you scared them." Winnie took a few steps forward. "All right, why do you keep saying we once you talk about the Boxtrolls? You're not one of them. You're a boy." A bad feeling began to spread in Eggs' stomach, as if he'd swallowed a bug that wasn't quite dead. "Of course I'm one of them. Of course I'm a Boxtroll. I'm Eggs. Don't you see my box?" He pointed down, then stopped. He had forgotten he was in disguise. Relief swept over him. That's what the problem was. She was only confused by his Sabatino outfit. "I mean, I'm not wearing my box right now because I had to put on a disguise to go into Cheesebridge. But I have one. I can disappear into my box just like any of them." X pointed at what now looked to be a simple stack of inanimate boxes. "Really?" "Prove it. Get your box and disappear into it," Winnie said. X pictured his tattered, grimy box and remembered how lately it had gotten so small. He could barely get it over his head. "It's, at the tailor's, getting adjusted," X said. "I'm unusually long-boned." "Uh-huh," Winnie said, looking skeptical. "And what about your speech? You don't talk anything like them." I have a... It's a speech impediment," Egg snapped. "Nice of you to bring it up. Way to make a Boxtroll feel sensitive." "Your ears aren't pointy," Winnie persisted. The bad feeling in Egg's stomach came back. It was true. No box troll had ears like this. I slept on them funny, Eggs mumbled. Oh, for goodness sake, Winnie exclaimed. All right, give me your hand. Eggs felt he'd rather be trapped in a small lifeboat with Madame Frou-Frou than show Winnie his undersized, oddly shaped, clawless hands. He tried to hide them behind his back. Winnie lunged forward and grabbed one. Then she pulled him toward Fish, who had popped back out of his box. Summoning all her courage, Winnie grabbed Fish's hand-sized hand, too. Then she held the two together. Do these look alike to you? Winnie asked. I don't know, Egg said, but at the same time, Fish sadly shook his head. Winnie dropped Fish's hand and discreetly wiped her own hand off on her skirt before pressing it against Egg's. Now look at my hand. Do our hands look alike? Fish nodded. I rest my case, Winnie declared. You are not a box troll, Eggs. You are not one of them. You are one of us. You're a boy, Eggs. Eggs's mouth hung open. He pulled his hand away and stared at Fish. Fish? Eggs asked. Tell her it's not true. I am a box troll, Fish. I'm a box troll, right? Fish looked down at the ground and shook his head. Eggs was positively dumbstruck. Yesterday he thought his world was coming to an end. Today he found out it wasn't even his world to begin with. See? Winnie asked. Now tell him the rest of the truth, Fish. Tell him you stole him when he was a baby. Oh, Fish exclaimed indignantly. Fish's voice sounded to Eggs as if it was coming from far, far away. But automatically, he translated. He says they didn't steal me. He says I was given, entrusted to him, Eggs whispered. Exactly what I... Wait, what? Eggs looked at Winnie, then at Fish. Fish? Is this all true? Who gave me to you? Fish sighed and burbled, pointing at some stacks of fabric tied up and resting near the water wheel. He says we should sit down and get comfortable, Eggs told Winnie. He says it's a long story. It was a long story, especially for Winnie, because she first had to listen to Fish gurgle, then wait a while as Eggs asked questions and looking disbelieving or angry or sad or confused, then finally translated for her. Winnie worked very hard to keep the details straight, because she knew they were of great historical import. The child had disappeared exactly 10 years ago and was the son of a kindly inventor whom Fish was somehow friends with. In fact, according to what Fish was saying, all the box trolls knew and liked the baby's his father, and they often worked on gadgets together. The man didn't even call them box trolls. He called them builders, and they helped each other with all kinds of inventions. In fact, they were all extremely fond of one another. Winnie tried not to look skeptical. She had never heard of any human who was friends with box trolls. Why would this information be kept secret? Then again, Eggs himself was clearly a box troll friend, and he was clearly human. Winnie kept her mind open and continued to listen. One night, the man was working late, with only one box troll to keep him company. Bang! Fish said. There was a bang, and the door burst open, and men burst into his hat, Eggs translated. Fish added some more babbling details. One man had a bat, one had a net, and one hollered and yelled and ordered the man around, Eggs said. They all wore red hats. Gristle, Pickles, and Snatcher, Winnie said, and Eggs nodded his agreement. Fish jabbered excitedly as Eggs' expression grew increasingly horrified. They ordered the man to make something bad, a weapon maybe, and he refused to do it, Eggs explained. When he refused, Snatcher told them they were going to take him away. When he thought they weren't looking, the man put his baby in the box troll's box and said, Whatever happens, keep him safe. And then... Egg stopped. He had tears in his eyes. Fish had tears in his big yellow eyes too. Fish put a comforting claw on Eggs's shoulder. Then there was a terrible, loud noise and a thud. And when the Boxtroll peeked to see what had happened, he saw the man lying on the floor. Dead. Winnie gasped. Snatcher had killed a poor innocent man for refusing to make an evil invention? Fish said, weeping. And then the baby started to cry, Egg said grimly. Fish strung a long rapid-fire line of gurgles together, punctuated by little sobs. Following the sound of the baby, the Red Hats discovered the Boxtroll. When Snatcher saw the Boxtroll, he ordered his men to capture it, but the Boxtroll ran off with the baby, and he didn't stop running until he got to the underground cave where he lived, and could make sure the baby was safe. It was his human friend's last request before he was killed, and the Boxtroll vowed to carry it out. Now Winnie was crying too. The baby lived among the Boxtrolls, and was loved and cared for by all of them, and was raised as one of their own, Egg said. Fish nodded. I was that baby, Egg said. Fish nodded. The man that Snatcher killed was my father, Egg said again, his voice trembling. Fish nodded. And you, he said to Fish, you were with my father that night. You were the Boxtroll he entrusted me to. You were the one he asked to keep me safe. His head hanging so low it almost touched the ground. Fish nodded one last time. All these years you've taken care of me, even though I'm human. Even though humans have been hunting the Boxtrolls like vermin. Fish's head snapped up. Blee blabbeware, gloopy box, glooparba Boxtroll, gooblia blee. Eggs wiped his eyes. He said it doesn't matter. I wear a box, so I am a Boxtroll. I'm family, Eggs whispered. He stumbled forward and enveloped Fish in a clumsy hug. Fish hugged him back, sniffling and reaching one clawed hand up to gently stroke Eggs's head. Winnie watched, utterly flabbergasted. She felt like her head was spinning. Everything she'd been told, everything she had ever been raised to believe her entire life, was a lie. She burst into tears, startling Fish and Eggs out of their hug. All these years we've been taught to hate you, she sobbed. We've been taught to cheer on the Red Hats who hunt you. The same ones who killed your father. This is all they're doing. They even used you, Eggs, to make us afraid of the Boxtrolls. Used me? Eggs asked. How? I told you back in the factory. Don't you remember? Winnie asked. Haven't you put it all together? The Red Hats used the story of the abduction and murder of the Chopshaw baby to scare Cheesebridge. But they made it up. It's all a lie. The only killers that night were Red Hats. Don't you see, Eggs? It's you, the little baby Fish hid in his box. You are the Chopshaw baby. Chapter 12. When Fish finally returned Winnie to Eggs's nook after an exhaustive tour of the cave and its every contraption, Winnie was exhausted. I could use a nap, she thought. She looked over at Eggs, who was sitting on an old rolled-up rug. He's barely said anything except to translate for Fish, Winnie thought, and he looks so sad. Poor kid. Hey, so where's this music machine you mentioned? Winnie asked. Eggs's face brightened, but only a little. He stood up and walked over to it. This is it, he said. You can do different stuff with it, program it, play some instruments on it. It even plays old records." "And you and Fish built it all by yourselves?" Winnie asked, truly impressed. Eggs nodded. "Golly, Boxtrolls are amazing," Winnie said. She bent down and picked up an old record lying on the floor. "Oh, wow, I had this record too," Winnie exclaimed. "This exact one. I left it by the window one night, and the next morning it was gone. I was so irritated. I suppose it must have fallen out or—" "Hey, I think this is my record." Eggs looked up at her, but he didn't seem to be listening. "What do fathers do?" Eggs asked. Winnie put the record down and sat on the rolled-up rug. She patted a spot next to her, and Eggs sat down. "That song from today," Eggs said, "that the big ugly lady sang on the outside stage. It said something about the Tropshaw baby's his father searching for him." Winnie nodded thoughtfully. "Well, a father is the one who raises you, I suppose. Looks after you, feeds you, keeps you safe, loves you." "Oh, like Fish," Egg suggested. "Well, sort of. I mean, Fish did those things for you, just like your father asked. So he's sort of acted like a father to you. But a real father, you know, they always listen to you and never get mad, and they guide you when you can't figure out what to do. They spend time with you because they want to, instead of just buying you junk to keep you quiet. And they're always there for you, even once you're scared or lonely or you hear a strange noise outside. A father is never too busy to talk to you and make you feel safe and—" Winnie's voice trailed off. A lump rose in her throat. "Hey, wait though," Egg said. "You have a father, so we could go to him for help." "What?" Winnie exclaimed. "Oh, no. Sorry, I gave you the wrong idea. I mean, I do have a father, but he's not like other fathers. You can't imagine what he's like. But he's the only father we have right now," Egg said. "Winnie, you have to try. Please. Everyone I love is being held prisoner in that factory." Winnie nodded. "I know. And Snatcher plans to kill every one of them." "What?" cried Eggs, springing to his feet. "Oh, I'm sorry, Eggs. I shouldn't have just blurted that out. But honestly, I just put it all together. I heard Snatcher say that to my father last night. He's such a deluded slimeball. He somehow thinks that killing all the Boxtrolls will make father grateful enough to promote him to a white hat." "Then you have to help," Egg said. "All right, listen," Winnie told Eggs, grasping his arm. "If I agree to help, to try, you have to promise me that you will do exactly as I say." "Of course, I promise," Eggs exclaimed. "All right. Well, the first thing we need is a makeover." "A makeover?" asked Eggs. "That's right," Winnie said. "Head to toe. Right now you're a walking hygiene and fashion disaster. Cowboy up, Eggs. We've got to change you into a real boy." Eggs tried to project his consciousness elsewhere over the next few hours, as he was bathed, scrubbed, buffed, polished, sheared, coiffed, and measured. As Winnie worked on him, she called out requests to the Boxtrolls, who scampered off and returned with assorted items and fabrics. Now Eggs was facing the indignity of standing in a clean pair of underwear with his arms out in a T, as Winnie held up various swatches of fabric beneath his chin. "No, absolutely not. This is a terrible color for you," she said. "Next!" A small Boxtroll darted forward and held up some cloth. Winnie gasped and clutched the string of pearls around her neck. "Velour?" she asked. "For formal evening wearing? Were you raised in a barn?" The Boxtroll ran away, and another one stepped forward with an armful of something fluffy and shiny. Winnie reached for it, ran her hands over it, and exclaimed in delight. "Silk chiffon! "Oh, we can definitely use this." She leaned down close to the Boxtroll who had brought it. "Can you find more like this?" "Silk. Silk. Can you find more? Chiffon and satin will do nicely too. All right? Yes? Capiche? Wait, am I speaking another language?" When he sighed, Egg sighed and turned to the group of observing Boxtrolls. "She wants shinies. Shinies to wear like boxes," he explained. Boxtrolls instantly took off in 8 different directions. "Excellent," Winnie said. "Whilst they're doing that, try on these pants I made you for size." It took a little awkward explaining and pantomiming for Eggs to grasp the concept of putting on a pair of trousers one leg at a time. Thankfully, once he was in them, he seemed to have no trouble with the zipper and the button. "Very nice," Winnie said. "They fit perfectly. How do they feel?" Eggs squirmed and tugged on the waistband and repeatedly kicked out his right foot as if he was trying to shake a snake off his leg. "They feel awful," he complained. "They are tight around my tummy and they tickle my ankles." "They're supposed to," Winnie said. "We must suffer for beauty. Everyone knows that." "I don't know it," Eggs thought, but he decided to keep the sentiment to himself. The same Boxtroll who had found the silk chiffon returned with a roll of shimmering blue material. "Oh, well done," said Winnie. "That's absolutely the right thing." The Boxtroll squirmed and fidgeted and looked very pleased, until the one standing next to him smacked him with a roll of tinfoil. "I'm just going to do a bit more sewing," Winnie said. "Sit down, Eggs. We'll be done before too much longer." Eggs sat down, then almost immediately stood up again. He tried stretching his trousers every which way, then finally gave up and lay down flat on his back. Winnie glanced at him occasionally as she sewed. "I'm really sorry about your father," she said quietly. "You must miss him very much." Egg shrugged, which is difficult to do properly whilst lying down. "Until today, I didn't even remember him," he said. "I thought I was born here. I thought I was a Boxtroll. The poor chap died trying to save me, and I didn't even remember he existed. Shows you how much his fatherly love was worth. I obviously didn't love him." Winnie temporarily dropped her sewing. It's worth more than anything in the world, Eggs," Winnie cried. "And don't you ever forget it. And I'll tell you something else. Any baby who has a father so loving, a father who would do anything, even die, to protect his child, any baby who is loved that much most definitely loves his father right back. He might not remember it, Eggs, but I promise you that you loved your father every bit as much he loved you. And he knew it. And you ought to be happy about that, because not everyone has it. Some people don't." Winnie rubbed her eyes, bowed her head, and picked up her sewing again. "Some people like who?" Eggs asked, propping himself into a sitting position. "Some people like some people," Winnie said. "You really never know. Now you've got to stop chattering, Eggs, or I'm never going to let this finish." Eggs obediently stopped talking. Whence Winnie told him to stand or hold his arm out or put his hands on his hips, he did it without comment. She must be allergic to that blue fabric, Eggs thought. Her eyes were all red and runny. Finally, Winnie stood up. "Here," she said, "put this jacket on." Eggs held it up over his head like it was an umbrella and swatted it with his other hand. "Here, give it," Winnie said with a sigh. "Same idea as pants. Slide in one arm, then the other. The opening goes in the back. If the opening is in the front, that means you put the wrong arm in the wrong sleeve." "But if I put the wrong arm in the wrong sleeve, wouldn't that make it the right sleeve?" Eggs asked. "Stop talking and let me look at you," Winnie commanded. She took a few steps back and stared at Eggs. He looked clean and shiny and polished and civilized, with one glaring exception. Winnie groaned. "Your feet!" she cried. "What the dickens are we going to do about those? Those teddy bear sneakers are revolting. I may be a decent seamstress, but I can't make a pair of fancy dress shoes. Shoo waddled up to Winnie and gurgled. I'm sorry, what? Could you speak up a little? Winnie asked. Shoo reached into his box and pulled out a pair of shiny black boxes. Oh, yes, those might work, Winnie said hopefully. Can you get yourself into these eggs? Winnie looked suspiciously at the narrow, shiny shoes, shook his head, sat down, and struck his feet in the air. He kicked off the old sneakers, and after a bit of pushing and tugging and a number of squeals, the new shoes were on and neatly laced up. Winnie held out her hand and pulled Eggs to a standing position. She gave him a long, thorough look, then nodded. Well, it's something, all right. You know, you look like an actual boy now, she said. An actual boy, Eggs repeated quietly. The Boxtrolls, who had been inching closer and closer to get a better view, all began beating their boxes and emitting little gurgling cheers of approval. Eggs took a deep bow and added a little curly flourish with one hand. All right, don't bury yourself in the pot, Winnie grumbled. Your makeover took a lot longer than I thought. If I'm going to get to my father in time, we need to get going right away. All right, Eggs? All right, Eggs agreed. I'm ready to go save the Boxtrolls, and nothing in this world or any other is going to stop me. He took one step forward, caught the toe of the dress shoe on a bump in the floor, and went sprawling face first in the dirt. Winnie shook her head in exasperation. You're going to have to do a little better than that, she told him. Egg sat up and brushed himself off, grinning. Don't worry, he told her. I will. Chapter 13. By the time Eggs and Winnie reached Market Square, it was dark outside. The Cheese Guild was lit up like a birthday cake. Light poured from every window, and the whole building seemed to shimmer and glisten against the gloomy backdrop of night. Ooh, so shiny, Eggs remarked, dazzled by the light. He walked quickly across the square, Winnie trailing behind him. She couldn't help but notice he walked more like an ape than a boy. Just as he reached the Cheese Guild steps, he wiped his nose on his sleeves and reached behind and scratched his bottom. Eggs! Winnie hissed. He turned and gave her a wide-eyed, innocent look. You have to walk more slowly and elegantly, like a dancer. You never wipe your nose or your mouth or anything with your sleeve, or any other part of your clothing, or your hand. And never scratch your back side in public, or your front side. All those things are extremely rude. Eggs looked genuinely confounded. Why? He asked. Winnie groaned. She spent so much time on his appearance, she had forgotten about his behavior. She grabbed his arms and pulled him off the steps and away from the light of the big front door. All right, look. For this to work, there are a few things you're going to need to know. First, once you meet someone, you have to look them in the eye and then shake hands. Hello, Egg said, opening his eyes so wide they bulged and raising both hands in the air and shaking them about. Stop joking about, Winnie said. What? That wasn't right? As Egg asked. Oh, bother, Winnie thought. What have I gotten myself into? Here, she said, taking his right hand in hers. Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you, she said in a crisp, snooty accent while simultaneously pumping their clasped hands up and down. Say it just like that, even if you're not pleased to meet them. As for everything else... Egg's face looked strained, and he frowned with concentration. Oh, forget it, Winnie said. Just remember that. And to stand up straight, shoulders back, chin up. Got it? I think so, Egg said. He went rigid, as if he'd received a mild electrical shock. Stick close to me, all right? Winnie said. Come on, let's get inside. They climbed the steps, and Winnie pushed open the huge front door. Immediately, a wave of sound swept over them, many voices talking and laughing at the same time. The entrance hall was filled with men and women dressed in luxurious suits and gowns and opulent furs and jewels. Eggs had never seen so many shinies in one place in his life. "Where's your father?" he asked. Winnie scanned the room anxiously. "I don't know," she said. "He's usually somewhere making a speech about cheese." A tall, oddly stick-thin woman with upswept hair and an abundance of enormous jewellery caught sight of Winnie and gave a half-wave with 2 fingers. "Winifred," she called. "Darling, where have you been? We're already on the appetizers." Eggs thought the poor lady must have something wrong with her mouth, because when she talked, it sounded like her teeth were all stuck together, uppers clamped onto lowers. "Hello, Mummy dearest," Winnie said. "You must—" "Oh," Winnie's mother said, drawing back slightly and clutching her necklace. "Who is this?" "Eggs," said Eggs. "But," Winnie continued quickly, "this is Egbert. Egbert Benedict. A perfectly normal name." "Egbert," murmured Winnie's mother, staring at her passive waiter. I do love these old-timey names from the Bible." Eggs grabbed the woman's hand and pumped it so hard that one of her bracelets flew off and landed on the floor with a clatter. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mummy dearest, even if it isn't," Eggs said with great confidence. Winnie winced, and her mother's eyebrows shot up. "You don't shake a lady's hand, only a gentleman's," Winnie whispered. "Winifred!" her mother interrupted. "What in the world are you wearing? You should have changed into your after-lunch, early evening Tuesday dress. Come along with me this instant." As Winnie's mother began to take her away, Winnie hissed at Eggs. "Try to fit in. When in doubt, say nothing. I'll be right back." Eggs did his best, but everything about the scene was so unnerving. There were so many cheese bits, all of them draped in layer upon layer of shinies. Instead of a music machine, they had people playing instruments, and some of the cheese bits were dancing. Eggs had to duck and sidestep to avoid being slammed into. He really did try to remember everything Winnie had taught him, but when he met another lady, he could only remember that shaking her hand was wrong, and he got confused and ended up licking her hand instead, which caused a small scene from which he hastily retreated it. "Maybe I should go eat something," Eggs thought. I might not have to talk to anyone if I do that." There was a long table laden with food, but none of it looked particularly appetizing, until Eggs caught sight of a single ladybug crawling up a stem in the flower arrangement. Was it rude to take the last bug? But he was so hungry. Eggs reached out, grabbed the ladybug, and popped it into his mouth. He heard a gasp and looked up to see Winnie's mother staring at him, evidently aghast. "I did something rude," Eggs guessed. He stared around at the other guests, who were all taking dainty bites of various things on crackers. "Oh, the crackers!" Gingerly, he spat the ladybug into his hand, picked up a cracker, placed the ladybug on top of it, and popped the whole thing back in his mouth. Winnie's mother looked like she was about to faint dead away. But the bug had awakened Eggs's appetite. He moved down the table, showing various things into his mouth, 2 and 3 at a time. When he paused to make another selection, Eggs noticed a number of cheese bits were looking at him strangely. Now what? He wondered. Then he noticed that all the cheese bits who were eating things from that end of the table were using little forks. Ah, all right. Eggs could do that. He picked up a fork, spat his partially chewed up cheese ball into his hand, scooped it up with the fork, and popped it back into his mouth. "I'm really adapting to these strange customs fast," Eggs thought with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please." "Quiet, everyone. Lord Portly Ryan is speaking," someone bellowed. Eggs turned and saw the large cheese bit with the red beard he'd seen at the Chopshaw Baby memorial procession. "Welcome, distinguished notables and muckety mucks," the man continued. "As you know, we originally planned this gala to celebrate the successful fundraising efforts for a new children's hospital. But after some discussion, My fellow white hats and I decided the money would be much better spent on something else. Without further ado, I present the Behemoth!" Lord Rhine stepped aside, revealing an enormous rounded shape covered by a sheet. With a great flourish, he whipped off the sheet, revealing a massive wheel of cheese. The assembled cheese bits went wild, gasping and clutching one another and cheering with all their might. "What in the world is the point of that?" Eggs wondered aloud. "Oh, nephew!" A suspiciously shrill voice called from nearby. "There you are, mon petit fromage!" People turned around and stared at Eggs. "Is that person talking to me?" he wondered, looking around. A mountain of a woman was barreling toward him, dressed in layers and layers of ruffles and shinies, and so heavily made up, she looked a little alarming. She reached forward and grabbed Eggs's arms tightly with a heavily bejeweled hand, plucking a piece of cheese from the table with her other hand and popping it into her mouth. "These parties are so confusing, no? Let Madame Frou-Frou help." Frou-Frou! The woman from the chop shop play. She looked much scarier close up. "Pleased to meet you," Egg said. Madame Frou-Frou beamed and extended her large hairy hand. None of the other cheesebit ladies have hair on their hands, Egg thought, or knuckles that enormous. And painting those lips red is a big mistake. It just calls attention to them. And was Egg simply disoriented by the bright lights and the crowd, or were Madame Frou-Frou's fingers growing fatter before his very eyes? Eggs looked up at Madame Frou-Frou and noticed that several distinct red blotches had appeared on her face. Just like the blotches that Red had got after eating cheese. And his hands had swollen up too. "You're no lady! You're Snatcher!" Eggs cried. The fake smile was replaced by a snarl, and Snatcher slapped his grotesque, still swelling hand over Eggs's mouth. "Don't make a scene, lad," he said, dropping the falsetto voice altogether. He yanked Eggs hard by the arm and dragged him into a small room filled with coats. He kicked the door shut, then grabbed Eggs by both shoulders. "Come to snitch an old Snatcher, have you?" he hissed, releasing a cloud of truly hideous breath in Eggs's face. "Do you really think a high-falutin fellow like Paulie Ryan and his fancy ilk will help a nobody like you? In this town, if you want help, you've got to help yourself. That's what a real man does." With his lipstick and blue eye shadow and dangly clip-on earrings, Snatcher didn't look all that much like a man to Eggs. "You're nothing but a lying monster," Eggs snapped. "When I tell Winnie's father the truth about you, he'll put a stop to you and your lies for good." Snatcher began rifling through the hanging coats as if he was looking for something, but still hung on to Eggs with his free hand to prevent him from escaping. "Tomorrow, I shall be the most respected man in Cheesebridge," Snatcher growled. "They shall have no choice but to give me a white hat. They'll parade me into the tasting room on their shoulders. I shall finally be accepted for who I really am." Snatcher found a long scarf in one of the coat pockets. He wound it tightly around Eggs's wrists. "And if you think I'm going to let some little Boxtroll-loving sewer rat get in my way, you're out of your mind," Snatcher said, moving to wrap the rest of the scarf around Eggs's neck. Eggs only had time to think, "He's going to kill me." But suddenly, the door flew open and someone came in. "Madame Frou-Frou, there you are, you Czechoslovakian minx. You promised me a dance." "I did?" Snatcher asked, then quickly switched to his Madame Frou-Frou voice. "Oh, of course I did, Lord Langsdale." Langsdale gave Snatcher a reptilian grin. "Well, I simply can't wait a moment longer, madame," Langsdale said, taking hold of Snatcher's arm and pulling firmly. "Oh, watch those hands now, Langsdale," Snatcher squeaked in his frou-frou voice. And then Eggs was alone in the closet. "Phew," he mumbled. "That was close." Eggs emerged cautiously from the closet. Snatcher was nowhere to be seen, and Lord Rhine was still up on the steps, stroking the massive wheel of cheese like it was a pony. But there was a sea of people between Eggs and the stairs. How was he ever going to get to Lord Rhine? There had to be a way, and the life of every Boxtroll in the Red Hat factory depended on Eggs's figuring on what it was. Chapter 14. Eggs, there you are! Eggs almost shouted with relief when he saw Winnie bearing down on him. We've got to get to your father, Eggs said urgently. Winnie glanced at the room thick with people. No problem, she said. We'll dance through. We'll what? Asked Eggs. Just follow my lead, Winnie said. It's a waltz. Easiest dance there is. Just step in threes. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So you make a box. Well, you took my box, Eggs objected. A box shape. With your steps. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly, they were twirling and spinning around the room. Eggs laughed out loud. He'd never seen dancing like this before. Boxtroll dancing was completely different, but he had to admit to himself it was fun. In the midst of a swell, Eggs caught a glimpse of Snatcher's enraged face, and all thoughts of fun left his mind. Snatcher's here, he told Winnie. What? Where? Dancing with that Langsdale chap, he told her. Winnie did a double take, then looked horrified. We've got to... she began, but she was drowned out by the booming voice of her father. Let's keep it exciting, everyone, he called. Everyone, change partners now! Eggs just had time to see Winnie mouth, sorry, before he was whisked away by a chubby woman who smelled so strongly of perfume that Eggs felt his eyes burning. That's the way! Enjoy it while you can, people! In 2 more minutes, everyone will change partners again, Lord Rhine called, looking excessively pleased with himself. Eggs saw to his horror that Snatcher was forcing his partner closer and closer to Eggs. Snatcher's going to try to dance with me next, Eggs thought. It was a horrifying thought for an endless number of reasons. And... change! Lord Rhine called. Eggs, look out! Winnie barked, stomping on her dance partner's foot so she could break free. Snatcher lunged for Eggs. Quickly, Eggs dropped to the floor. Camouflaged by the sea of billowing skirts, he scrambled away on his hands and knees, heading for the stairs. He had a clear shot at Lord Rhine now. Lord Rhine was so consumed by stroking, smelling, and admiring the massive cheese wheel that he did not even notice Eggs clambering toward him. Eggs was practically at Lord Rhine's feet when someone grabbed his leg hard. Let me go! Eggs bellowed, and Lord Rhine finally noticed him. What the devil? The large red-haired man began. Eggs bent almost in half and sank his teeth into Snatcher's hand, biting down as hard as he could. Snatcher let out a deafening howl and maneuvered himself between an angry Eggs and an astonished Lord Rhine. My lord, I have to warn you that... Snatcher began, and Eggs dove at him, figuring a body tackle might shut him up. But Snatcher ducked, and Eggs went sailing over him, colliding violently with the enormous wheel of cheese. The wheel teetered back and forth precariously, then rocked clear off the small pedestal holding it. No! Lord Rhine screamed as the cheese began half rolling, half bouncing down the staircase. It was a sight both magnificent and horrifying. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as the colossal wheel bounced on the floor and continued to roll, gaining speed and momentum as it went. There was nothing anyone could do. In a matter of seconds, the cheese had rolled out the front door, which happened to be standing open, and bounced regally down the steps. The room fell deathly quiet. Through the open door, the cheese could still be seen, rolling across Market Square. An excessively short, bald man near the stairs remarked, Sure hope it stops before it reaches the... A huge splash sounded in the distance. River, the man finished quietly. Lord Polly was absolutely frozen with shock. Eggs felt a hand gently touch his shoulder. Well, at least it got his attention, when he said with a rueful smile. Everyone in the room, Lord Polly included, was now staring at Eggs. "What have you done?" he bellowed, his face bright red with rage. Egg stood up, straight, shoulders back, chin up. "Mr. Lord Winnie's dad, and all you people of Cheesebridge, Archibald Snatcher has been lying and deceiving every single one of you," Eggs declared. "He has told you that Boxtrolls are monsters, that they steal and eat true children. But that isn't true. Boxtrolls have never hurt anyone. I know that because I've spent almost my entire life with them. They are my family, and I am the Shropshire baby." Lord Polterrind was thunderstruck. He scratched his head, squinted as if in a deep thought, then opened his mouth again. After a moment he closed it again. He turned and stared very hard at the place where the behemoth had been just moments earlier. He extended one foot in its long pointy shoe and slid it around the step, as if he expected it to connect with the behemoth, which would be found to be not missing, but simply rendered temporarily invisible. His foot found nothing. He turned and fixed Eggs with a dark look. "Do you," he said, pointing at Eggs, "have any idea how much that cheese cost?" "I said I'm the What?" Eggs must have misunderstood Lord Polterrind. Surely the man wasn't simply going to ignore the bombshell Eggs had just dropped. "We might as well have built that silly children's hospital now," Lord Polterrind said, shaking his head. "Father!" exclaimed Winnie. "Did you hear what he just said? Do you know how long it is going to take my men to pull that cheese out of the river?" Lord Polterrind barked. "I don't know how they're going to do it without scarring the rind." If you won't listen to me, sir, ask Snatcher yourself. He's right there. Yes, that's right. Your beloved Madame Frou-Frou is actually Snatcher in disguise. He's been making complete idiots of you all," Eggs cried. Everyone began to laugh. "Stop laughing," Winnie yelled. "He's telling the truth." "Eggs, show them," she said, yanking on her hair. Eggs immediately understood. Before Snatcher had a chance to back away, Eggs plucked the wig right off his head. The crowd fell silent. The expressions changed. "Oh my," Snatcher said. "You have me. You see, the truth is I am not really a redhead." "This is an outrage!" shouted someone. "The very thought!" yelled another. "I always knew there was something not quite right about Frou-Frou!" exclaimed a woman. Lord Polterrind's dark look had changed to a livid stare. "You have disrupted my celebration and insulted the guest of honor? Who are you?" he demanded. I'm a boy," Egg said. "And how did you get into this building, boy?" Lord Polterrind asked. "He came with me," Winnie said, folding her arms and lifting her chin diffidently. "He's my friend, and everything he's told you is true." "Enough!" Lord Polterrind hollered. "You, boy, I never want to see you again. Do you understand? Leave my house. Now!" Eggs was stunned. Winnie was standing with her head hanging. This was it? Everything they had gone through, just to be ignored and humiliated? Everyone there had heard Egg say he was the Shropshire baby they all pretended to care about so much, but the truth was, they didn't care. They were only interested in their things, and their clothes, and the cheese. Eggs turned and walked silently down the steps. Toodaloo! sang Snatcher, waving. The crowd drew back as Eggs passed. No one spoke to him, but everyone stared. He walked out the front door and down the steps. Moments later, the music started again. On the far side of Market Square, Eggs struggled to dislodge a manhole cover. He was so exhausted and demoralized he could scarcely manage it. He sat back on his haunches for a moment, hearing the sound of footsteps running toward him. "Eggs! Eggs!" Winnie called. Eggs looked up at Winnie wearily. "You said fathers helped." "You said they took care of their children," he said bitterly. "They're supposed to," Winnie replied. Eggs gave the manhole cover a yank, and this time it slid free. "People above ground are just mean and selfish." "They're monsters," he said, beginning to climb into the manhole. "Not all of them," Winnie said. "You're not." Eggs gave her a sad look. "Well, I don't want to be a boy anymore. I'm going back underground." "It was a pleasure to meet you, Winnie," Eggs told her. "Oh, Eggs," Winnie said, tears welling in her eyes. "I really do mean that," he said. "But I need to go home now." Winnie didn't try to stop him as he dropped out of sight. Chapter 15. Eggs popped off the conveyor belt and onto the landing pillow. He ducked out of sight for a moment. He didn't want to tell them what had happened. He didn't want to admit he had failed. He didn't want to see their eager faces just before they learned they were doomed. But he owed it to them. They were his family, his friends, his world. Even if they only had a short while left, they deserved to hear the truth from Eggs. "This is the worst day of my life," Eggs thought. Then he took a deep breath and strode into the center of the cave, waving. Immediately, he was surrounded by excited Boxtrolls. They babbled loudly and drummed on their boxes. "No, no! Listen to me! All of you! It didn't work!" Eggs cried. "They're not going to help us! They don't care that Snatcher is going to destroy us all!" The Boxtrolls stopped drumming on their boxes and looked at one another. "Snatcher is planning something. He's going to take the rest of us out. He thinks he'll get a white hat if he does. We have to get out of here, all right? We have to leave the cavern." None of them moved. "Did you hear what I just said?" asked Eggs. "We have to get out of here. Snatcher is coming for us. Perhaps right this minute. We have to go out now." Some of the Boxtrolls were backing away from Eggs and shaking their heads. Several others sat down on the ground. "What are you doing? Get up! We have to go! Fellas, you can't just hide!" But this is exactly what the Boxtrolls were doing, disappearing one after another into their boxes. "Fish, help me!" Eggs pleaded. Fish responded by handing Eggs his old box. "No, I can't hide in there." Fish persisted, pushing the box against Eggs' chest. "No! I am not a Boxtroll!" Eggs shouted, smacking the box out of Fish's hands and kicking it away. Fish immediately disappeared into his own box, which was trembling along with him. Eggs knelt down next to him. "Fish, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Please, come out. Please. We're running out of time." Suddenly, the entire cavern began to shudder and rumble as if it had been struck by an earthquake. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. The bulbs in the chandelier overhead began flickering. Then there was a popping sound, and the cavern went dark. "It's too late," Egg said quietly. "It's Snatcher. He's here." The rumbling grew louder and louder. A crack appeared in the ceiling and quickly grew into a hole. Something sharp and shiny was eating away at the hole, making it bigger and bigger. Huge chunks of rock were crashing to the cavern floor. As Eggs watched in horror, a machine emerged. A massive drill capped by an enormous boxed cabin. The whole thing cobbled together with a series of gears and cables and canvas and metal. So that's what Snatcher had the Boxtrolls building, Eggs thought. The drill took several more bites out of the rock, and then the entire machine plunged through the hole and crashed onto the cavern floor. Boxtrolls scattered in every direction. As clouds of dust settled around the machine, 2 huge spotlights switched on. There was a whirring and grinding sound. Then the box slowly raised itself on 3 metal legs, having deposited 3 red hats on the ground. "Pickles, Trout, and Gristle," murmured Eggs. "But where is—" There was a bang, and a hatch on top of the box flew open, and a head appeared. It was Snatcher, still wearing his frou-frou makeup. In the eerie light, his powdered face and crimson lipstick made him look like a clown who's gone over to the dark side. "How's that for an entrance?" Snatcher crowed. "Dramatical!" said Pickles. "The bard himself would be impressed, boss," added Trout. "We drilled through the earth!" Gristle announced. "Time to earn me my white hat, lads!" Snatcher called. The spotlights were moving, scanning the cave for fleeing Boxtrolls. The light seemed to paralyze them. Instead of continuing to run, they curled up and hid in their boxes. Gristle began rounding him up. "No!" Eggs yelled. "What are you doing? Escape up the tube!" Eggs shoved several Boxtrolls closest to him toward the tube, but they remained huddled inside their boxes. My, Snatcher called merrily. "What a surprise! Doesn't look like your little friends want to run away, does it?" "Please," Eggs begged the Boxtrolls, "just go to the tube." But as soon as he said it, a mechanical arm began to unfurl from the cabin of the drill machine. It extended itself to the sucker upper, then promptly smashed it to bits. Eggs struggled to get the Boxtrolls out of the way. Trout and Pickles were coming toward Eggs. "A noble effort, Miss Master Tropshaw," said Trout. "But goodness always triumphs over evil in the end," Pickles added, "which I'm pretty sure is us." Eggs was still holding one of the cowering Boxtrolls, and Trout reached out and yanked the box from his hands. Pickles made a grab for Eggs, but the boy dove out of the way. As Trout added his catch to the pile of Boxtrolls he had corralled, another mechanical arm extended from the cabin and began to vacuum up the Boxtrolls. "Don't hide! Stop hiding! You've got to fight back!" Egg screamed. Snatcher laughed. "Ha! Boxtrolls fighting back? These gutless chickens? You know as well as I do. It just ain't in their nature," Snatcher jeered. "Stand up for yourselves! Fight!" Eggs pleaded. But the Boxtrolls were all disappearing in front of his eyes, caught in nets, thrown in the pile, and sucked up into the giant machine. More mechanical arms unfurled, smashing everything in reach to bits. Within minutes, the water wheel was destroyed, and all the walls were tumbling down. Eggs heard a whimper. It was Fish, huddled nearby in the remains of the garden. Eggs ran to him and clutched him. "Stop it! Please!" Eggs called. The spotlights fell on Eggs, nearly blinding him. "I told you, child! Boxtrolls never help themselves. That's why they will always be losers." Snatcher called, adding a cheerful laugh. Eggs reached into Fish's box and found his big hand. He squeezed it tightly. The giant vacuum was pivoting toward him. Eggs grabbed a giant cabbage from the ruined garden and hurled it into the nozzle, effectively blocking it. Eggs grabbed Fish and began to back away, never noticing Gristle was pointing his neck gun directly at them. Blam! Everything went topsy-turvy. Eggs felt a tremendous pain in his head. He did not know if he was conscious or dreaming. He thought he heard Fish's voice, but it sounded so far away. "Make sure to get the boy too," Snatcher ordered. "I've got something special planned for him." Rough hands reached into the net. Eggs felt himself being slung over someone's shoulder, but he couldn't move. Then something began growling and hissing. "Whoa!" Pickles cried. "Never seen one do that before. Careful of this, fellas. That is different behavior and makes me uneasy," Grizzle declared nervously. "Got him!" Trout yelled. Eggs tried to open his eyes. The last thing he saw was the drill spinning, continuing its destruction of the cavern as it made its ascent. Eggs caught a glimpse of his nook, with his precious music machine collapsing in on itself. Then, mercifully, everything went black, and Eggs saw no more. Chapter 16. When Eggs awakened, he found himself in a cage that was suspended from the ceiling of the old Red Hat factory. Nearby, another cage hung, slightly higher than his own. Eggs rubbed his eyes and peered down. The Red Hats were stacking all the captured Boxtrolls into neat piles under some sort of contraption. Eggs realized what the thing was and gasped with horror. It was a giant box crusher. "Jelly?" came a voice nearby. Eggs jumped and looked around. The voice had come from the other hanging cage. Eggs stood up to get a better look. A man was hanging upside down in the cage. His hair and beard were long and matted, and his eyes were unusually bright, giving him a thoroughly crazed look. "Well, I'm good. I get jelly. I like jelly," the man said. "Who are you?" Eggs whispered. "Who are you?" the man asked. I don't know anymore," Egg said wearily. He closed his eyes. "Boy?" came the voice. Eggs didn't answer. "Boxtroll?" Egg still didn't answer. "Dressed like a Boxtroll, but looks like a boy," the man said with a wild giggle. "A boy troll? or a box boy? Try the Latin. Arca, archa, pur. Jelly! A new species, unknown to science, new and improved. Who did that? You did that! That you did! You made you!" Eggs opened his eyes and looked at the prisoner. "I did what?" Eggs asked. The prisoner stared at him very hard, then winked. "Jelly!" he whispered. Snatch's sneering voice tore through the darkness behind them. "The poor father woke. Oh, he cried, cried, cried. Oh, 'cause he forgot to lock his babe inside," Snatcher sang. Eggs froze. He even stopped breathing. The world seemed to be reeling with the revelation. "Are you my father?" Eggs asked the prisoner. "They didn't kill you either." "Jelly!" the prisoner responded. Then he began cackling uncontrollably. "Father!" Eggs called. "He was once," Snatch interjected and laughed meanly. "You won't get much out of him now, though. A decade hanging upside down scrambled his noodle pretty good. Still, he did a fine job designing my monster drill. Best inventor your town, your dad. Working with the best little builders." He gave the stack of Boxtrolls a kick. "But the filthy beasts have served their purpose," Snatcher continued. "Time to crush 'em. Are you ready, Mr. Trout?" "Just a few more to add to the pile, boss," Trout replied. "Why?" shouted Eggs. "Why would you do this?" Snatcher gazed up at Eggs. "Fair question. See, Portly Rind and his ilk, they might need a bit of convincing. I'm going to have to show them I've really exterminated all the Boxtrolls. So think of me as a hunter presenting his pelts. Proof of a job well done." "No!" Egg screamed wildly.
You can yell all you want, boy, but you've seen it yourself. These Boxtrolls aren't going to run.
Eggs winced. I know, he whispered. As more Boxtrolls were placed on the pile, Eggs could see they were all trembling in terror. Tears spilled down Eggs's face, but he couldn't look away. They were his family. They were all he had.
Make way, man! I want to pull the crushing lever myself,
Snatcher called. He gave Eggs an ugly grin.
It's the little moments that mean the most.
Snatcher headed for the crushing machine. Eggs sat down heavily in his cage and buried his face in his hands. It's over, he whimpered. The prisoner began chuckling. You made you, he said. Why do you keep saying that? Eggs asked. What did I do? You made you, he repeated. He was staring very intently at Eggs. Something in the man's eyes made Eggs feel he might not be as crazy as he seemed. You did it, the man said, pointing at the pile of Boxtrolls. Tell them. I tried. They won't listen. They're scared and they can't change who they are, Eggs replied. You can do it. You made you. You made you. Eggs racked his brain, trying to understand what the man was telling him. He looked down at the trembling pile of Boxtrolls. Why not give it one more try, Eggs thought. What do I have to lose? Fish! Shoo! Everyone, listen! You can do it, because I did it! I am a Boxtroll too, but I left the cavern. I took off my box and stopped hiding, and that means you can do the same thing. Just stand up and take the first step. The Boxtrolls seemed to have stopped shivering. Were they listening to him? All you have to do is get out of your boxes and put one foot in front of the other. Eggs banged the bars of his cage loudly. Please, do it for me. Please. There was silence. None of the Boxtrolls were moving.
Well, good speech,
Snatcher called cheerfully.
Wish I could hear it again, but I've got some boxes to crush. 3, 2, 1!
Snatcher flipped a giant lever. Eggs threw his arms over his eyes. There was a bone-chilling, sickening crunch sound. When Eggs opened his eyes, the pile of boxes had been flattened into the ground. No! Eggs screamed, shaking with sobs.
All right, man, load 'em up,
Snatcher called. The Red Hats began tossing the flattened boxes into the cab of Snatcher's giant drill. Eggs hugged his knees and sobbed bitterly. Look what you did! Look what you did! Said the prisoner. What do you mean? I didn't do anything. I failed. Eggs sobbed. Look what you did! Look what you did! He kept repeating. The monsters are all loaded up in the mecha box, boss, called Trout. Snatcher stared up at Eggs, giving him an ugly look. All but one, Snatcher growled. Eggs watched in horror as Snatcher waltzed toward his cage. No, Eggs whispered. Wee! Snatcher said in his frou-frou voice. Let's put on a little show. Costumes, makeup. One of the Red Hats grabbed Eggs through the bars and crammed a Boxtroll mask over his head. Snatcher howled with laughter. The mecha box powered up with a series of whirls and whines. Hatches slammed shut. The world rumbled as the machine began to crawl across the factory floor and out a massive set of double doors. The cavern was left in darkness and silence, save for a single voice. Look what you did! Chapter 17. Winnie was having a very bad dream about an earthquake when the sound of a voice blaring over a loudspeaker awakened her.
Hear ye! Hear ye! A new day is dawning! Come out of your homes, good citizens of Cheesebridge! The curfew has been lifted.
Winnie sat up slowly, the blood draining from her face. "Oh no," she said. "Please don't let this mean what I think it means." She quickly dressed and ran down the stairs and out the front door. Standing on the Cheese Guild's front steps, Winnie could see that all over Market Square people were emerging from their homes. An enormous machine was rolling across the square toward the Cheese Guild, and riding it like it was some kind of horse was Snatcher himself. He talked into a gadget that broadcast his voice through a loudspeaker on the machine.
"Fear not," he announced. "The monsters have been vanquished."
Winnie stopped in her tracks and pressed her hands to her stomach. She felt as if she might be sick right there.
"Join me. I am the purger of your pests. I am the White Knight who has taken back the night,"
Snatcher boasted. A small crowd had gathered and was following the lumbering machine, parade style. So he really did it, Winnie thought, fighting back tears. He killed all the Boxtrolls. Oh, poor Boxtrolls. Poor eggs. A fellow wearing a one-man band contraption joined the crowd. Snatcher pointed at him.
"You there! Play something celebratory," Snatcher ordered. "I've just exterminated an entire species."
The one-man band obliged, striking up a cheerful tune as Winnie made an exclamation of disgust. "That despicable, monstrous, deceitful Red Hat!" she said, wiping away tears. Deceitful. Indeed, Snatcher was the most deceitful human being Winnie had ever known. Was it possible, even just remotely, that Snatcher was being deceitful now too? Maybe he's lying, she told herself. Maybe there's still hope. The procession had almost reached the Cheese Guild steps. Snatcher trilled into the loudspeaker.
"Oh, Lord Portly Rind! I come bearing the most delightful news."
The door behind Winnie opened, and her father brushed past. He blinked in amazement at the giant machine, and the crowd, and the triumphant Snatcher. "Snatcher! What is this thing?" Winnie's father demanded, pointing at the machine.
"Oh, this old thing?" Snatcher said, blinking rapidly a la Madame Frou-Frou. "Why, it's simply the brilliant creation I used to deliver our fair town from its pest problem forever, as advertised." He tipped his hat. The crowd burst into applause. "That's quite the claim," Lord Portly Rind said, looking sceptical. "Can you prove it?" Snatcher gave him a reptilian smile. "I thought you'd never ask." "Boys, show him!"
The Red Hat scurried forward and deposited a stack of flattened boxes at the bottom of the stairs. They fanned them out like gory welcome mat. Winnie pressed a hand over her mouth. "No," she whispered. The crowd was gasping and murmuring excitedly. Lord Portly Rind looked positively astonished.
"Your lordship, I promised that I would not rest until I caught the very last Boxtroll, and, as you can see, I am a man of my word,"
Snatcher declared. He flipped a switch on the mecha box, and the mechanical arm swung around, displaying a chain from which dangled Eggs, who was decked out from head to toe in a Boxtroll costume. "What? No!" shouted Winnie, but the excited and alarmed crowd drowned out her voice.
"Fear not! The monster is safely restrained. He is all that remains of the foul Boxtroll hordes."
"Eggs!" Winnie screamed.
"With this Boxtroll," Snatch continued, "I shall end the reign of terror. I give you peace. I give you freedom. I'd say that deserves a white hat, wouldn't you?"
The crowd cheered wildly. "A white hat for Snatcher!" someone yelled. "Behatify him already!" called another. Lord Portly Rind shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other.
Yes, well, I'm not sure. It's a complicated business. There'd have to be a vote, and a shipping order, and paperwork. Oh, lots and lots of paperwork, he said hurriedly. White hat! White hat! White hat! The crowd chanted. Snatcher bowed to the crowd, then turned to Lord Portly Rind, his arms flung wide. Yes, all right. I suppose I must have an extra one lying around here somewhere.
Oh, no, Snatcher said. Methinks a deed of this magnitude deserves something a bit more significant. I want your hat, Portly Rind.
Preposterous, thundered Lord Portly Rind. Winnie was waving at Eggs, trying to get his attention, but he didn't seem to see her. It was impossible to tell with that mask pulled down over his face, and his head hanging down like that, as if all the fight had gone right out of him. He must be terrified, she thought.
Preposterous,
repeated Snatcher, leaning forward the crowd.
My good friends, what do you think?
A chorus of voices erupted. Just give it to him! He earned it! That's right, just hand it over! He's liberated us! Give him the hat! Looking grim, but realizing there was no way out of it, Lord Portly Rind nodded.
Fine,
he said through gritted teeth. As soon as that last Boxtroll is dead, you may have my hat. Snatcher squealed with glee like a little girl.
Oh, I just knew you'd come around,
he exclaimed. Let us proceed with the execution. No! Stop him! Someone stop him! Have you all lost your minds? That's the Shropshire child! This is murder! Winnie screamed, lunging forward and shoving her way through the crowd. Burn the beast! Burn the beast! Burn the beast! The crowd chanted. Snatcher hit a button and a door in the mecha box slid open, revealing the glowing red metal and flames of the furnace that powered it. Snatcher climbed out of the cockpit and lowered himself to the ground on one of the machine's arms. He handed to Trout a small box with several buttons and a long antenna.
Gentlemen, do the honors. I have a hat to receive.
Hat! Exclaimed Gristle, nodding his head. Pickles and Trout were exchanging nervous glances. Winnie was just feet from them now. I thought this was all going to be a show, like the frou-frou thing, she heard Pickles say to Trout. I didn't know he really meant for us to do it.
This really does stretch the limits of the term hero,
Trout agreed.
Didn't we always agree we'd stop if it wasn't fun anymore?
Gristle caught Trout's last remark and snarled something threatening and unintelligible. Trout gulped.
Or we could do as we're told, he added.
Looking unhappy, Trout swung Eggs closer to the mouth of the furnace. Heat him up! Heat him up! The crowd chanted. Stop it! Don't! Winnie yelled. It's murder! Gristle laughed and rubbed his hands together. I'm enjoying this! He announced. Winnie looked back at the Cheese Guild. Father! Father! She screamed. But her father was scowling as Snatcher spoke rapidly and excitedly to him, and he stared fixedly in the other direction.
Trout!
Snatcher bellowed.
Lower the beast into the furnace. Musician, drum roll, please.
Lower the beast! Lower the beast! The crowd sang. A drum roll began as Snatcher removed his red hat, sent it sailing into the crowd, then lowered himself on bended knee before Lord Portly Rind. Oh, very well. Repeat after me. With this hat, I... State your name.
With this hat, I, Archibald Penelope Snatcher.
Winnie turned back to face Pickles and Trout. They had moved the cage a little closer, but their distressed expressions clearly indicated that they do not want to kill Eggs.
Snatcher bent and tried to navigate his head into the white hat Lord Portly Rind was holding out. But Lord Portly Rind shook his head and gestured toward Eggs's cage, which was still not in the furnace.
"Move it along, Trout," Snatcher bellowed. "I have a life of privilege to live."
Don't we mean we?
Asked Trout, looking even unhappier. He began to lower the cage again. Winnie sprang forward and grabbed his arm. "No! Stop!" she cried.
Can't, miss,
Trout said, pointing at Snatcher.
Apologies.
"We're just doing our jobs," Pickles added. "Your jobs?" Winnie shouted. "Are you pest exterminators or evil henchmen?" Pickles gasped with dismay. "I told you people might think of us that way," he said to Trout, looking deeply hurt. "You don't have to do this," Winnie pleaded. "You can go from henchmen to heroes." Trout halted the descent of the cage.
You know, she has a point, Mr. Pickles, he said. This could be our big shot at redemption.
"Everyone loves a good redemption story," Pickles replied.
We're flawed, but people love a flawed hero,
Trout said excitedly. "Yes, sure, we totally do. Just let him go," Winnie said urgently. Trout handed the remote to Winnie. She was trying to figure out which button would lift Eggs up and away from the furnace when someone loomed up behind her. "Got it!" Gristle roared, grabbing the remote control out of her hands. "No!" Winnie screamed. She turned to Pickles and Trout. "Do something!" Trout shook his head remorsefully.
Sorry, miss, he said. We may be good guys deep down.
"But Gristle definitely ain't," finished Pickles. "Rotten to the core." "I am a reprehensible person!" Gristle shouted with pride. In desperation, Winnie turned back toward the Cheese Guild steps. "Father, please!" she screamed. But Lord Portly Rind was too busy trying to keep the white hat off Snatcher's head, while Snatcher kept trying to wiggle his way up under it.
"Quiet, please, for the ceremony of the hat,"
Snatcher bellowed. The crowd instantly fell silent. Lord Portly Rind sighed. "With profound esteem for dairy and dairy products, I proudly swear to uphold the dignity of the white hat," Lord Portly Rind recited tonelessly.
"I proudly swear to uphold the dignity of the white hat,"
Snatcher repeated. Lord Portly Rind squinted and scowled, as if he couldn't remember his next line. As the hushed crowd waited expectantly, Winnie heard a strange noise in the distance. As it grew louder, she realized it was a voice, shouting a single word over and over again. "Jelly! Jelly! Jelly!" Gristle spun around, looking for the source of the voice. His mouth dropped open as Snatcher's truck came careering into the square. Winnie cried out with surprise. To her astonishment, Fish and Shoe were stacked behind the wheel. In the passenger seat sat a pale man with wild hair, a long beard, and strangely familiar eyes. He was laughing in delight. Chapter 18. "Eggs, look!" Winnie cried, pointing at the truck. "It's Fish and Shoe! They're alive!" Eggs began to look around. He bobbed his head back and forth, trying to shake the mask loose. "Oh good, he heard me," Winnie thought. "He knows there's still hope." The truck screeched to a stop in the center of the square, and scores of things emerged from the back. For a moment, Winnie didn't recognize the Boxtrolls, because she'd never seen them without their boxes. "Look!" Winnie yelled. "Boxtrolls! Tons and tons of Boxtrolls!" Winnie began to shout and scream. "They're nude!" screamed someone. "It's worse than that! They're naked!" cried another. Winnie waved to get her father's attention, but it wasn't necessary. He had seen the Boxtrolls.
"Snatcher, what the devil is the meaning of this?"
he thundered. Snatcher's mouth hung open in disbelief.
"I'm as befuddled as your lordship. I crushed those creatures myself."
Lord Portly Rind began to turn a shade of red that Winnie knew meant absolute unfettered rage.
"Archibald Penelope Snatcher, you are a liar, a cheat, and a fraud,"
Lord Portly Rind shouted, placing the white hat firmly back on his own head.
"That is the closest you will ever come to having a white hat."
There was an explosion of squeals and gurgles, and Winnie turned around just in time to see a slew of Boxtrolls swarming over Gristle. Fish emerged from the pile, triumphantly holding up the remote control. Gristle hurled several Boxtrolls to the ground and lunged at Fish. "Fish! Look out!" Winnie screamed. Then she heard a bang, and when the smoke's cleared, Gristle was trying to fight his way out of a net. Pickles stood over him, holding the net gun, which made him look not exactly dangerous, but more threatening than usual, as he jumped up and down on his giraffe-long legs. "Redeemed!" Pickles announced.
100%, Mr. Pickles,
Trout agreed, clapping him on the back with one hand and rubbing his own excessive belly with the other. Fish squealed with delight as he found a button that swung Eggs clear out of the furnace. Eggs was wriggling his way out of the Boxtroll costume. With his hands free, he pulled off the mask and tossed it away, then launched himself into the arms of the ecstatic Boxtrolls.
"You're alive!" Eggs shouted. "But how? I saw Snatcher crush you!"
Fish gurgled a mile a minute, adding hand gestures, as Eggs listened with amazement. Winnie pushed her way through the Boxtrolls until she reached Eggs. "Really? That's incredible," he told them. Winnie cleared her throat as loudly as she could. "Winnie!" Eggs exclaimed. Winnie opened her mouth to say something, then lunged forward and threw her arms around Eggs. Then she stepped back to look at him. "I'm so glad you're okay," Winnie said. The tips of Eggs' ears had gone quite pink. "And the Boxtrolls too. What did Fish say? I'm dying to know what happened." "He says after I begged them to try to get away, they all tunneled down to the bottom box in the back, one after another, and wriggled out. Snatcher never noticed a thing. When the crusher came down, all the boxes were empty." "Oh, how brilliant!" Winnie exclaimed. "You did it! You all got out of your boxes and stood up for yourselves. I knew you could do it," Egg said, hugging Fish as tightly as possible. "I just knew it."
"Why is that boy hugging a Boxtroll?" yelled a townsperson.
"Are they friends?"
"They can't be! Boxtrolls are monsters!" called the woman.
"Boxtrolls are not monsters," Winnie shouted at them. "They never ate the Tropshaw baby, as you can see for yourselves, because he's right there with Fish and—" She stopped mid-sentence when she turned to find the wild-haired man standing next to him, who was beaming at him. "And my father," Egg said, finishing Winnie's sentence.
"Your father?"
Winnie asked, her eyes huge.
"Look what you did,"
Mr. Tropshaw murmured, smiling at Eggs. "You were right, father," Egg said. "They did listen to me. Thank you."
"Jelly,"
Mr. Tropshaw replied happily. A murmur was spreading through the crowd. "Is that Tropshaw?" came a voice. "Tropshaw the inventor? The baby's father?" called another. "Tropshaw is alive?" asked a third. "Snatcher lied to us!" a shopkeeper shouted. Then suddenly, the whole crowd was yelling and calling Snatcher a liar. "That's right!" came Lord Portlyrine's thunderous voice. "Snatcher, you villain! It is time to pay for your lies and the disrespect you paid our beloved Madame Frou-Frou!" Where was he? Winnie and Egg scanned the crowd. Snatcher was nowhere to be seen. "Maybe this would be a good time for the Boxtrolls to unflatten their boxes and put them back on," Winnie suggested to Eggs tactfully, because really, some packages were best left unopened. The Boxtrolls pounced on the boxes spread out at the bottom of the stairs, and to Winnie's relief, they were all soon reboxed. Just as things began to quiet down, a high, shrill voice pierced the air.
"Excusez-moi, boys!"
cried the voice of Madame Frou-Frou. The crowd turned toward the voice. There, atop the mecha box, was Snatcher.
"Bonjour, Portlyrine. We could have been something special, chérie. Maintenant, you have broken our agreement."
Frou-Frou's voice called down, taunting. "Why is Snatcher talking like Madame Frou?" said Lord Portlyrine, his face turning an alarmingly red. "Now,
This is awkward. I regret so much.
Snatcher yanked on a lever, and the mecha box began moving toward Lord Portly Rind.
I shall take my white hat now, or I shall destroy this whole town, brick by brick and person by person. How do you like me now, boys?
And with a tug on one lever, the machine lumbered forward, all its mechanical arms and tentacles extended and smashing and striking and crushing everything in its path. Lord Portly Rind sprinted away from the machine into the crowd. "What do we do?" when he cried. "If that thing destroyed the Boxtrolls' cavern, it could destroy our town too." "And all of us along with it," she added silently. Had it all been for nothing? "We can still fight back," Eggs cried. To his delight, the Boxtrolls had not run off, and they were not hiding in their boxes. They clustered around Eggs, who gave them an encouraging smile. "You're not afraid anymore, are you?" he asked. Fish, who was right next to him, took Eggs by the hand. Eggs grinned. Then they both turned to stare at the machine. "Time to fight back," Eggs said grimly. "Timer to fight back," Fish repeated. "Hey, I understood you," Woody exclaimed. "Listen, everyone," Eggs said. "You all built that mecha box. That means you know how to take it apart, so it won't work anymore, right?" The Boxtrolls nodded excitedly. There was a crash as a leg-like appendage from the mecha box slammed into the ground just feet from them. When the leg lifted, Egg saw there were several Boxtrolls clinging to it, pulling various parts off and tossing them into the ground.
Get your grimy paws off my machine, you vermin!
Snatcher screamed. On the machine's other side, Boxtrolls were stacking themselves and trying to lift the top Boxtroll up onto the mecha box itself. The stack was several feet too short to accomplish this, until a heavy-set man stepped forward from the crowd and hoisted the entire stack over his heads.
"We're with you, lads," the big man shouted encouragingly.
"The whole town will be with you," Pickles said. "People of Cheesebridge, the Boxtrolls need our help. Bring tools, weapons, mechanicals!" The response was instantaneously. The people ran forward with hammers, wrenches, gears, and bolts. The youngest and strongest lifted the Boxtroll towers to help more and more of the creatures onto the mecha box. One of them hoisted Sparky onto the back of the machine. Holding tight with one hand, he pulled open a control panel and began tearing out wires as the crowd cheered. Oil can ran back and forth under the machine's feet, squirting puddles of oil in the hopes of making it slip. "I think they're going to do it," Winnie exclaimed. "I think the Boxtrolls are actually going to take the mecha box down." In the cabin, Snatcher was trembling with rage. Suddenly, the white hat was sailing over the crowd. A Boxtroll leapt up, caught it, and handed it to Winnie. "I've got to distract Snatcher, so the Boxtrolls can keep taking the mecha box apart," Winnie thought. "Yoo-hoo! Mr. Snatcher!" Winnie called, waving the hat in the air.
"Give me that, you vile little brat!"
Snatcher howled, steering the mecha box toward Winnie. "Uh-oh," Winnie thought, staring with alarm at the massive machine. "Maybe I should have thought my next move, though." Suddenly, she saw Trout and Pickles running toward her.
"Perhaps we can be of some assistance,"
Trout cried. "Most certainly. I love a good game of pass the hat," Pickles agreed. Winnie gave them a relieved smile and tossed the hat into Pickles before diving out of the path of the mecha box. Pickles put the hat on. "So this is what all the fuss is about?" Pickles asked. "How do I look, Mr. Trout?" Before Trout could answer, there was a crash as one of the smashing arms of the mecha box slammed down just inches from Pickles' head. He tossed the hat to Trout, who tossed it to Winnie, who tossed it back to Pickles as the mecha box veered back and forth between them.
"It's mine!"
howled Snatcher as the white hat went sailing into the air again. Someone jumped up, arms outstretched, and caught the hat. "Jimmy!" Mr. Tropshaw announced triumphantly, waving the hat around. Gristle caught sight of it and gave a bellow of rage. "Hat!" he yelled, pushing his way closer to Tropshaw. Winnie watched the Boxtrolls clinging to the mecha box and wondered how much of it they managed to disable. It still seemed to be moving at full speed, and it was heading straight for Mr. Tropshaw. As it loomed over him, a giant smashing arm unfurled. Gristle shoved the last person aside and came face to face with Tropshaw. Tropshaw smiled and plopped the hat on Gristle's head, then dove out of the way. The smashing arm slammed into Gristle, setting the hat sailing into the air again. But before the arm could smash anything else, it suddenly broke off of the mecha box and fell to the ground. Winnie could see Fish and Eggs clinging to the wire above it, just outside the cockpit, grinning triumphantly. The Boxtrolls cheered wildly. They were making progress.
"Stop destroying my indestructible machine!"
Snatcher screamed. He leaned out of the cockpit and began swinging a giant wrench at Eggs' head. "Eggs, look out! Get off of here!" Winnie screamed. But she knew Eggs would not give up until the mecha box was beaten. "We don't need to take it apart. We need to stop it," Winnie cried. "But how?" "Put it out," came Mr. Tropshaw's voice from just behind her. "What?" Winnie said, turning to give Eggs' father an anxious look. "Put out the fire, and the machine will die," Mr. Tropshaw explained. "But how? Put out the fire with what?" Winnie asked. "Jelly!" Mr. Tropshaw said. As soon as the word came out of his mouth, he shook his head. Sorry, I mean water." Water? Winnie stared intently at the mecha box. At its front, the huge vacuum arm swayed back and forth like an elephant's trunk, sucking up any Boxtrolls that got in its way. "Water," Mr. Tropshaw said, pointing at the vacuum arm. "Suck it up like jelly. Fire goes out." Suddenly, Winnie understood. The mecha box was powered by its furnace. If the fire went out, the mecha box would go dead. "We have a plan," Winnie called out to everyone around her. "The hose! Mr. Tropshaw says we can turn it on Snatcher. But I need everyone's help. Boxtrolls and Cheesebridgians too." People miled about, confused, but Mr. Tropshaw leapt onto a railing. He pointed one hand at the vacuum tube and one hand at the manhole cover in the street. Clinging to the mecha box, Eggs saw his father and instantly understood the plan. Eggs began shouting directions to the Boxtrolls closest to him. Snatcher could hear Eggs shouting, and he snarled with rage.
"You think you can destroy me, Tropshaw baby?" he bellowed. "That you can ruin 10 years of meticulously planned? I think not!"
Eggs flattened himself, reached out, and smacked a lever. The mecha box instantly lurched to one side, causing the vacuum arm to smack the ground. A line of townspeople and Boxtrolls was ready. They grabbed hold of the huge tube, then formed a makeshift conga line to stretch the vacuum as far as possible. "Boga!" Fish shouted, pointing to the manhole cover. "Right this way!" Winnie agreed. "Hey, I understood him!" The line of volunteers followed Winnie and Fish, hauling the end of the massive tube toward the manhole. A large man jumped forward and pulled the manhole cover off. Shu grabbed the mouth of the vacuum and jumped down into the manhole with it. "Now, Eggs! Now!" Winnie and Mr. Tropshaw shouted in unison. Snatcher had pulled a cane from the cockpit of the mecha box and was swinging it wildly at Eggs. "I'm going to have to time this perfectly," Eggs told himself. Just as the cane whizzed past his head, Eggs dove for the controls, smacking the vacuum lever into the intake position. Then he stared in disbelief. Nothing happened. The plan hadn't worked. Chapter 19. "What's wrong? What happened?" Winnie cried. Mr. Tropshaw ran forward and peered into the sewer, where Shu was still dangling from the tube and dragging it down with his weight. "Too short!" he exclaimed. "Everyone must pull on the hose as hard as they can! Everyone!" There was a sudden loud shriek from a Boxtroll, who realized several of them were standing on the tube. "Papika! Huevo! Veda!" he cried. And the culprits leapt clear of the tube, which instantly stretched out farther. On the mecha box, Eggs cringed. Snatcher had lifted his cane again and was preparing to bring it down on Eggs' skull.
"You should have stayed underground, you filthy little monster!"
Snatcher sneered. "I am a boy, and I'm a Boxtroll. You are the monster, Eggs declared. The hose still hadn't reached the water. Joining in the effort, shouted Pickles, running to pick up the hose. Giving it everything I've got, called Trout, grabbing part of the hose again. All right then, pull, Winnie hollered. Jelly! Dropshot shouted suddenly, flashing a thumbs up. On the mecha box, Snatcher had frozen.
Me? A monster?
Snatcher hissed, rearing back and raising the cane high in the air to deliver a crushing blow. There was a loud sucking sound, as if someone getting to the bottom of a thick milkshake with a straw. The tube went fat and stiff as thousands of gallons of water shot up it and into the guts of the mecha box. A massive cloud of steam exploded into the air with a deafening hiss. Eggs was blasted clear of the mecha box and bounced painlessly off the top of a vendor's tent before landing on his feet in the square. With a series of agonizing squeals and pops, the mecha box began to slow and shudder. We did it! Egg shouted. His voice seemed to echo at the other end of the square. We did it! We did it! Boomed other voices. The crowd turned to see three white hats rolling the behemoth toward the cheese guild. We did it! Langsdale repeated. We got the cheese out of the river. Oh my. The white hats realized that Market Square was a smoking, rubble-filled war zone. They stopped rolling the cheese and stared up at the hissing, smoking mecha box. Lord Portly Rind? Langsdale called, squinting and trying to see through the clouds of steam. What's happening? Called Lord Boulanger from his wheelchair. I've gone blind! I've gone deaf! I can't see a thing! What? The mecha box made a groaning sound and listed to one side. The weight of the massive drill was enough to carry it over. It came down with a crash as the white hats dove out of the way, Langsdale managing to pull Lord Boulanger's wheelchair with him. Splat! The ruined mecha box had landed directly on the behemoth, sending missiles of shredded cheese into the air. Lord Portly Rind, who had finally gotten his white hat back, watched the mess with a look of dismay. The crowd was greatly cheered by the sight of the cheese and began to clap and howl. People pulled big globs of cheese off one another and stuffed them into their mouths. The cheese began to ripple and squirm as if it were alive. Then a cheese-covered figure struggled out of the blob. It was Snatcher, who landed directly in it. He staggered away from the cheese, and Winnie lost sight of him. We did it, Winnie thought, looking around. Working together. Boxtrolls and people. She opened her mouth to call Eggs' name when a fat squishy hand clapped over her face from behind. Winnie shoved it away, but she could not escape the tight grasp on her arm. She screamed with all her might. Eggs spun around and saw her. It's Snatcher! He's got Winnie! Eggs cried. Snatcher, who seemed to be rapidly swelling to twice his normal size, lurched toward Lord Portly Rind, dragging Winnie with him. Winifred! Lord Portly Rind shouted.
Give me my hat!
Snatcher hissed. Lord Portly Rind pulled the hat from the head and lunged forward, holding it out to Snatcher. Take it. Take the hat. Take whatever you want. Just let go of my daughter, he called. Winifred, be brave. Stiff upper lip. I won't let that villainous cur take you from me. Snatcher's swollen, sweaty hand completely covered Winnie's mouth and some of her nose, but her ears were working just fine. When she heard her father's words, her knees went weak with disbelief and joy. She had played out this moment in 100 different fantasies, almost plunging to her death from a cliff, almost drowning in a boating accident, almost losing her life in a burning building, almost being dragged to the death cave by a monster, and each time her fantasy ended the same way, her father, distraught and desperate, calling to her to hang tight, because he would save her. Because he loved her. And now it had actually happened. He does love me, more than his white hat, more than his cheese, more than anything. Snatcher grabbed the hat with his hideous sausage-plump fingers, but when Lord Portly-Rhymes reached for Winnie, Snatcher hauled her back. He smashed the hat onto his now strangely misshapen head and tried to smile, giving himself a hideous jack-o'-lantern face.
Ha! Now all bow down to Opus Archibald Snatcher,
he lisped. Gentlemen, comply, Lord Portly-Rhymes snapped, dropping to his knees. Snatcher howled with laughter, and the harder he laughed, the tighter his grip on Winnie's neck. Eggs noticed with horror that her face was beet red. He's going to choke her to death, Eggs thought. Snatcher! Eggs shouted. Snatcher peered around with eyes now swollen into little slits. Over here, Egg said. Aren't you forgetting something? You said when you finally got your white hat, you were going to sit on velvet cushions and eat the finest cheeses in the world, didn't you? Snatcher nodded, suspicious. But you're giving up before even setting foot in the tasting room? Egg said.
Yes, of course,
Snatcher wheezed.
Portly-Rhymes, your cheese is mine.
What are you doing? Lord Portly-Rhymes hissed to Eggs. Saving Winnie, Eggs replied. Trust me. All right, Lord Portly-Rhymes called, running up to the Cheese Guild steps. Follow me. I shall open the door for you. Snatcher lurched up the steps like the hunchback of Notre Dame. Winnie gave Eggs a terrified look as Snatcher dragged her inside the Cheese Guild. Eggs ran up the stairs after them, skidding to a halt in the main hallway, just outside the tasting room door. Snatcher was going wild, pulling out cheese after cheese from the cabinets and tossing them onto the table.
Tasting time,
he yelled.
With whiteheads, now sit down.
Lord Portly-Rhymes urgently signalled to his men to enter the room. Do as he says, he told them. Bewildered, and more than a little grossed out by the sight of Snatcher, the white hats took their seats around the table.
Now we eat cheese like proper gentlemen,
Snatcher commanded. Oh, then you must start with the very strongest cheese, Eggs called to Lord Portly-Rhymes, emphasizing his words with a significant nod. Yes, of course, Lord Portly-Rhymes said, making his bewilderment as best he could. He summoned the butler and pointed to a glass case with a giant padlock. The butler nodded, unlocked the case with a key that hung from a chain around his neck, and placed the box on the table. Lord Portly-Rhymes lifted the lid and removed another, smaller box, also held shut with a padlock. That one was unlocked as well, and Lord Portly-Rhymes reverently placed his hand on top of it.
Gimme!
Snatcher said. Now hold on, Sir Broderick interrupted. That's a rare curd indeed. The most potent cheese on the continent.
Indeed, only the most robust iron-bellied gentleman can stomach it,
Langsdale added it. All true, Lord Portly-Rhymes said. It's made from milk aged in the mummified stomach of a mammoth in a sulphur cave that is only accessible by man for 20 minutes out of every year. Are you, quite sure you can handle it?
Of course,
Snatcher said, looking as offended as someone with an elephantine marshmallow for a face could look. Lord Portly-Rhymes opened the box. Instantly, the white hats began to cough and sneeze. Eggs was hit with a wave of smell so hard it made his stomach spasm, and his eyes burned from the fumes. Winnie staggered backward and dove clear of Snatcher just as her father reached into the box and placed the cheese on the table. A tiny, bumpy green thing that looked like a booger. Winnikins! Lord Portly-Rhymes exclaimed, grabbing hold of his daughter. Oh, my Winnikins, you're safe! Winnie beamed at her father.
shush!
Snatcher shouted.
This is my destiny!
Wait! Eggs called, seeing Winnie safely out of Snatcher's grip and in her father's arms. Don't do it, Snatcher. It won't change who you are. Don't eat that. It will make you very sick, or quite possibly kill you. Snatcher, swollen from head to toe from his full cheese immersion, turned his hideous swollen face toward Eggs. Cheese, white hats, They don't make anything. They don't make you, Egg said. You make you. Snatcher hesitated for a moment, then glowered.
I have made me, boy,
he growled. Then he popped the cheese into his mouth. The white hats let out a collective gasp. Everybody, under the table, quick! Eggs yelled, ducking behind the door and covering his head with his hands. He's going to blow!
This is really...
Snatcher's voice was silenced by a loud wet explosion and what sounded like shovelfuls of pudding hitting the walls and ceiling. When the worst of it seemed to be over, Egg slipped and slid along, colliding with Winnie. There you are, Egg said with enormous relief. Let's get you out of here. Definitely, Winnie said weakly. Eggs helped Winnie outside and down the Cheese Guild steps. It's all over, folks, Eggs called to the crowd. Snatcher has left the building. Forever. A giant cheer spread through the square. People clapped their hands and Boxtrolls drummed their boxes. I must look a fright, Winnie said, looking down at her dripping, torn dress. To her surprise, her father's mangled white hat lay on the steps, just by her feet. She leaned down and picked it up. Father's hat, Winnie said. Who can believe all this happened over a silly hat? Father will want it cleaned. It's got strange stuff all over it. Blobby things. Looks like... Jelly, came two voices in unison. Winnie looked up at Eggs, standing straight and tall next to his father, whose eyes gleamed and twinkled at her. Yes, Winnie agreed, smiling. Jelly. Epilogue. Winifred Portley Ryan stood front and centre on a stage set up in the middle of Market Square. A mass of townspeople and Boxtrolls gathered around the stage to listen, enraptured. And there I stood, in the hideous clammy grasp of Snatcher, until my noble father had served them the cheese that would become his own demise, Winnie declared. Within moments of putting that priceless cheese in his foul mouth, Snatcher went kabloom! And the rest, as they say, is history. 1 year ago, this very day, ladies and gentlemen, happy first Shropshire's Day. The crowd clapped and whistled. Pushing close to the stage, X tried to get Winnie's attention. Not now, Winnie whispered. I've still got to tell the story of the Boxtrolls and the Crusher of Doom. But where's Fish? X asked. Winnie shrugged an apologetic, I don't know. I'll find you after the show, Winnie said. Then she turned her attention back to the audience. Egg slipped around the back of the stage and walked up the cobblestone street. It looked much the same as it had a year ago, except for some new businesses. Oil Can's fix-it shop seemed to be going especially good business. And as usual, there was a small line at Sweet Softy Eye stand right next door to Sparky's scrap shack. But still no sign of Fish. He passed Pickles and Trout, or was it Trout and Pickles? Eggs could never remember which was which. They were cheerfully sweeping up the street. Afternoon, Mr. Egg Shropshire, Pickles called. Ain't it nice and tidy? Trout added. Very tidy, Egg said. Have you two seen Fish? They shook their heads in unison, never stopping their sweeping for a moment. Thanks anyway, Egg said, continuing up the street. Eggs heard the rumble of an engine, and then a horn honked. Eggs! Egg spun around and spotted a truck. At last! He waved happily at Fish and his father, who was driving. It hardly looked like the same vehicle Snatcher and his red hats had once used to patrol the streets and capture Boxtrolls. In place of the chair on the roof of a car, Mr. Shropshire had bolted Eggs' music machine, and the red hat logo had been painted clean over, replaced with the silhouette of a Boxtroll and 3 arrows making a circle, a reminder to all to reuse their junkie bits rather than throw them away. I've been looking everywhere for you, Eggs cried as Mr. Shropshire pulled the truck over to the curb. Look what I found! A brand new copy with no scratch! Eggs held the record up for them both to see. It was their favourite, Quattro Zapatinos. Fish gurgled with delight. "Brilliant, son!" exclaimed Mr. Tropshaw. "Let's give it a spin." Eggs tore the paper off the cardboard cover, balled it up, and tossed it into a nearby rubbish can. The can made a small noise, then Shoo popped out. "Shoo!" Eggs exclaimed. "Sorry, I didn't know you were in there. Find anything good?" Shoo climbed out of the rubbish can and waddled over to the truck as Mr. Tropshaw reached up to put the new record on the music machine. Gurgling, Shoo reached into his box and handed a grimy, torn thing to Eggs. Then he waddled off down the street toward the next rubbish can. Eggs stared at the thing, perplexed. It didn't look like the sort of junky bit Shoo or any other Boxtroll usually picked up. The thing didn't look like it had ever served any purpose. And yet, as the sound of the Quattro Zapatinos began blaring merrily from the music machine, Eggs felt there was something familiar about the object. He fingered a bit of shredded ribbon on the thing, and when the sun caught it for a moment, he saw 2 letters. PR. "It's Lord Portly Ryan's white hat!" Eggs thought, amazed. "What did you find, son?" asked Mr. Tropshaw. "Anything good? Something we can use in the shop or for parts?" "Afraid not," Eggs said. "This thing is very useless." "Brilliant," Mr. Tropshaw said. "Then hop in. I do love taking a nice drive whilst listening to music. I've missed listening to the Quattro Zapatinos. I've missed so much. What do you say, son? Shall we be on our way?" Mr. Tropshaw's expression was eager and relaxed. His hair and beard now only the tiniest bit wild after being cut and conditioned and smoothed for Tropshaw's day in Cheesebridge's fanciest saloon. And as always, the sight of Fish, nodding his head and tapping his box in time to the music, filled Eggs's heart. His 2 favourite people, who loved him best in the whole world. Only a year ago, humans and Boxtrolls had been enemies, one hunting the other. Now they lived in harmony, side by side. Eggs tossed the hat back into the rubbish. He smiled at Fish and at his father. Then he climbed into the truck and squeezed into the seat between them, and the truck began to move just as Eggs's favourite songs started to play. It was all perfect, as if their lives until now had been a story, nearly tied up in a happy ending bow. And there was nothing wrong with a happy ending, Eggs thought, because no matter how often you used one, it never got old, or stale, or outdated. It worked every single time.
There's a pink one and a green one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just